Jim, how are you doing this beautiful morning?
Take a two-lane trip of memories into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's
Mr. Keith Kentner, how are you, sir?
Jim Hinckley.
With Stephen all the way from London. Mr. Andy, how is everybody doing on this beautiful, beautiful Sunday? Thank you, Jim. Well, good morning, mi amigos. You know, I always get excited with the arrival of spring. It's the kickoff for a few months of hiking and camping and road trips and shared adventures and visits with friends, barbecues, car shows, and sharing the sunset on the back porch with my dearest friend. After the train wreck that was 2020, the sense of enthusiasm and eagerness for road trips and to visit with friends is palpable. There's still a need to be a bit cautious and use some common sense, but it does look like we are getting on the backside of this COVID-19 pandemic. Still, when I pause to think of the families that have suffered loss and the folks that are dealing with the after effects, my excitement is tempered with a bit of somberness. Sorry about that, kind of went off topic a bit. The program on Sunday morning is an escape from our worries, troubles, frustrations, where we talk road trips. So let's put aside our problems for a little bit and share an adventure with friends. This morning, I'm sharing a few of my favorite adventures in New Mexico, the land of enchantment. And I could easily spend a week or two inspiring road trips in New Mexico. But since we only have a half hour, this morning I'm going to be focusing on the southwest and northwest corners. Still, there's lots to share. So we're going to be riding hard and fast. Perhaps on future programs, I can share other adventures from this amazing state. Here's a teaser for this morning's program. Let me tell you about the amazing Catwalk near Glenwood, New Mexico. Now, last week I talked about US Highway 180 as being one of my favorite drives out of Holbrook. Well, here's another reason, especially when we get on the New Mexico side of things. The Catwalk's history began with the discovery of gold and silver in the rugged Mogollon Mountains above Whitewater Canyon. Then in 1893, a small town of Graham grew up around a mill that was located on the west hillside near the present-day parking lot. To service the mill, a pipeline with Catwalk was built through the canyon. The mill only lasted about 10 years. Then in the mid-1930s, the Civilian Conservation Corps rebuilt the three-quarter-mile Catwalk and added a picnic area near the mouth of the canyon. This is a very accessible area. It's a relatively easy hike. Absolutely incredible. But unfortunately, it is not handicap or wheelchair accessible. But it's suitable for kids. The beauty of the canyon is just absolutely stunning. Bring a picnic basket, your walking shoes, and pick a day that's warm enough to enjoy the swimming hole. Before we get to some road trip inspiration, I want to say thank you to the boys of the road crew for our theme song. If you need a theme song for your road trip, take a listen at roadcrew66.com. And I want to give a shout out to Mr. David Brenner at the Roadrunner Lodge in Tucumcari, New Mexico. This once derelict motel has been lovingly transformed into a circa 1964 time capsule with all the modern amenities that travelers expect. a restful night's sleep, and a bit of time travel. That's what you can expect at the Roadrunner Lodge in Tucumcari, New Mexico. Last week, I mentioned again that Highway 180 out of Holbrook down to Silver City, New Mexico, it rates really high on my list of top drives in the United States. Let me share a few of the places that make this what I think of as a perfect road trip. The highway is a 2-lane for most of the drive, and at the crest of each hill, the view is more awe-inspiring than the one before it. Most of the drive is follows the lay of the land, twists and turns, and elevations vary dramatically. So there's a really rich diversity of landscapes. There are lakes and pine forest, and there's dusty little towns that seem suspended in time. One of my favorites is Glenwood, and I do hope that their businesses survive COVID. There are some real gems and treasures here. The Chili Rellenos and Chili Verde with a cold beer at the Blue Frontier Cafe and Bar, man, that is a real treat after a day on the road. And the Whitewater Motel in Glenwood was built sometime after World War II. It's more than an oasis to rest the weary head. This thing has been lovingly cared for and maintained. You got the modern amenities, but yet it's got a feel of 1950. And on the back porch, it sweeps along under the towering sycamore trees, and you're overlooking the San Francisco River and the mountains in the background, the Mogollons. Makes it impossible not to simply just sit, relax, savor the view. Now, most every road trip is enhanced with a detour or two. Just before Glenwood, Highway 159 is 1 lane in places. This town sits at 6,500 feet in the Mogollon Range, and it's one of the gateways to the vast Gila Wilderness. In the 1870s, Sergeant James Cooney of Fort Baird, he found gold near the site of Mogollon, and it was a miner named John Eberl. He built the first cabin here in 1889, and within months, Mogollon was a boomtown. The jail and post office opened in 1890, and the first school was added in 1892. Glenwood, Hila, and Cliff prospered as they were located along the more than 75-mile trail from Silver City to Mogollon. This was the wild and lawless frontier during these years. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid used a ranch at Alma below Mogollon as a hideout before setting out for South America. Billy the Kid's mother is buried in Silver City. Between 1872 and 1873, the stagecoach from Mogollon to Silver City was robbed 23 times. Today, Mogollon is pretty much a ghost town with only a couple dozen hardy year-round residents, and most businesses are only open on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday between May and October. There's an art gallery, there's a pretty interesting mining museum, a couple antique stores, there's a quaint little cafe, and seasonal weekend accommodations. I hope these businesses survive too. I lived in Silver City for a bit as a kid. Then I moved back in the late 70s. I went to work in the mines at Santa Rita, the open pit mines, and the mill at Hurley. And I worked underground in the old mines up at Hanover Horton. And I also worked as a cowhand on the Sierra Mesa spread along the Members River near Faywood. Silver City is a treasure. In the surrounding mountains are the Gila Wilderness and the Gila National Forest. Endless opportunity for adventure. History here is measured in centuries, not decades. As an example, aside from Las Vegas, New Mexico, Silver City has one of the best preserved Victorian-era business districts in the state. It has a diverse, dynamic, and vibrant culture. There are Mexican families that have lived in this area for more than 200 years. There are multi-generational families of miners and ranchers. Western New Mexico University brings in students from throughout the world. The university and the National Forest Service employ some folks best described as, well, liberal. It makes for a most interesting, eclectic, vibrant, and exciting mix. One example of what makes this town really special is picturesque Big Ditch Park, right downtown in the historic heart of the city. Believe it or not, this was once the main street, but in 1895, a massive flash flood destroyed businesses and transformed the street into a 55-foot deep ditch. The businesses that survived simply transformed the fronts into the back, and the back facing Bullard Street was transformed into storefronts. And the corridor now is a beautiful urban park. Silver City is ideally suited as a base camp for fascinating, fun-filled day trips. As an example, Highway 15 up to the Gila Cliff Dwellings National Monument is a stunningly scenic drive, just 45 miles. But the paved highway is so mountainous and so twisted that they recommend 1.5 hours for the drive. And that's if you don't make a bunch of stops, which it's almost impossible not to. This highway courses through the Gila Forest and the Gila Wilderness and along the Gila River. And along the way are amazing places like Doc Campbell's Gila Hot Springs Resort, a complex of cabins, a small store, and a campground, and of course, hot springs. It's really neat when you stay at the Hot Springs Resort. They use a lot of the hot springs water for their plumbing. And it's kind of a shock on a cold fall morning to find warm toilet seats. When you add photo stops at the scenic pullouts, you can consume the most of a day pretty easy. Accessing the cliff dwellings, which is a remnant of the Mogollon culture, requires a moderately difficult hike of about 1 mile each way. And then they've got ladders to climb up into the cliff dwellings. But it's a scenic hike along a stream in a really narrow canyon. The Visitor Center Museum, they're well worth the visit. And from the Visitor Center, there are miles of trails into the wilderness area and along the Gila River up to the headwaters. This is a great summer getaway, but I don't recommend it in the winter. Elevations are 6,500 feet and up. And at the higher elevations, snow in May is not unheard of. As a bonus, there are picturesque old places like Pinos Altos. Native Americans had gathered copper in the area for centuries before Spanish explorers came to the area in the late 18th century. Mining commenced in about 1800. A small town and presidio were established as the Apaches did not take kindly to the invaders. This was pretty much abandoned by the time the Americans arrived, started mining, and established Pinos Altos at the site in about 1860. This was Grant County's first county seat. The town is located along the Continental Divide at an elevation of 7,000 feet. The town's history includes the Apache War of 1861 when Cochise joined 400-strong Chiricahua Apaches under Mangus Coloradus to drive away miners from their traditional homelands. Roy Bean and his brother, they opened a mercantile store here in the 1860s before moving to West Texas to gain fame as Judge Roy Bean, west of the Pecos. On my last visit to Pinos Altos, that store was still in operation, but now it was an ice cream parlor. The Buckhorn Saloon and Opera House are now a steakhouse and a bar. They date to the mid-1860s. Day State Park, Saywood Hot Springs, and back to Silver City on Highway 180. History, scenery, charming small towns, this drive has it all. Fort Baird, that dates to 1866, is a well-preserved frontier-era military installation. The open pit mine started as the Chino Copper Company in 1909 and slowly engulfed the old town of Santa Rita. A fort and mine had been established there in 1804. Now, the Faywood Hot Springs is a real treat with a colorful history. For the Members people, this was a place of healing. Spanish explorers established an outpost near here in 1785. In 1859, a hotel and bathhouse were built at the springs, and Andrew Graham built the stylish 60-room Casa del Consuelo in 1896 after a fire destroyed the old hotel. This became, for a short period of time, a winter training camp for the Chicago Cubs. And in the mid-1990s, the springs were again transformed into a resort. But back when I was working the Sierra Mesa spread a few miles to the east, it was just picturesque ruins and the old stone-lined pools. The ranch itself that I worked on had lots of ruins. It had been a farming town on the Members River back in the 1830s and a stop on the Butterfield Overland Trail. On my days off, sometimes I'd saddle up, pack a lunch and a few books in a saddlebag, and I'd follow the old trail to the springs. I have really fond memories of this. One morning, I was sitting there soaking. I rode out to the springs in a cold winter's morning, heavy gray clouds over Cook's Peak and the Black Range. And I was soaking in the upper spring, and I was reading Black Range Tales by James McKenna. It began to snow. God, that was beautiful. Another drive that I have to recommend is Highway 180 and then Highway 152 across Arenas and the Members River Valley and up over the Black Range into the old town of Hillsboro. And if you do that drive, be sure to make the side trip down to Lake Valley south from Hillsboro on Highway 27. Jaw-dropping views. That is just one part of the attraction. Another is great campgrounds, such as the one on Iron Creek, and lots of hiking trails. And then there is history. There's the faded old town of San Lorenzo, dates to about 1714. Kingston, Hillsboro, and Lake Valley are picturesque ghost towns with small populations and lots of great photo ops. All three of these towns have a rich and colorful history. I mentioned the book Black Range Tales by James McKenna. This was first published back in the 1920s, but it was reprinted a few years ago, and last time I had checked, it was still available on Amazon. I highly recommend this if you're a fan of or you have an interest in Western frontier history. It's a great read. It's McKenna's tales of life on the Western frontier in the Black Range from the 1870s through the 20th century. It goes into deep detail about the Apache Wars, cliff dwellings, exploration, trapping, hunting, and the transition of the West. Hey, before we move on to the northwest corner of New Mexico, let me tell you a bit about the ghost town of Lake Valley. Lake Valley was one of the big mining camps to emerge near the south end of the Black Range about 1880. Hillsboro and Kingston, the other two are a few miles away, all had extensive gold and silver claims. Hillsboro was basically a gold camp, had a beautiful courthouse that's now in ruins. Kingston and Lake Valley were built on silver, and they were all plagued by Apache raids. But what makes Lake Valley really unique in the annals of Western frontier history and mining and ghost towns is the Bridal Chamber. To the best of my knowledge, this is the richest silver discovery in history. Small silver mines were operating in the area when in August 1881, some miners broke into a chamber that measured more than 100 feet by 100 feet and varied from 10 to 20 feet from floor to ceiling. Almost the entire room was lined and filled with interlaced crystals of native silver. It was so rich, miners' lamps were used to melt almost pure silver from the walls. Saws, axes, and hatchets were used to cut silver blocks. One horn silver crystal was a mass of over 10,000 pounds. That's a record that still stands. and records indicate 2.5 million ounces of silver was recovered from the Bridal Chamber. And nearby, there was what they called a lesser discovery, the 30 stope, and they produced 1 million ounces of silver. Now, let's talk about another great drive and two amazing communities. We start with delightful Tucumcari that is so full of surprises. This Route 66 gem exemplifies the old adage about never judge a book by its cover. Yes, the town has faded quite a bit since Route 66 was bypassed. And yes, that decline is glaringly obvious in abandoned truck stops and empty storefronts. But this town is vibrant. Tucumcari has lots of folks possessed of infectious enthusiasm. It is made manifest in the Main Street program initiatives, the renovated vintage motels, the neon signs, at the Route 66 Museum in the restored railroad depot. I mentioned David Brenner. He's transformed the derelict motel into a wonderful 1964 time capsule. The Blue Swallow Motel that dates to 1930s has, with its beautiful neon sign and trim, this is perhaps one of the most famous and most photographed motels on Route 66. And the Motel Safari that dates to 1960. Now that is a true treasure as well. But the Route 66 corridor is only a small part of the city's charm. Often overlooked is Mesa Land's Dinosaur Museum and Natural Sciences Library. I am surprised that this museum is missed by so many Route 66 travelers, and I'm amazed by the quality of the museum in such a small town. The main exhibit hall houses a multitude of replicated and original fossils, everything from footprint castings to a 40-foot-long skeleton of Torvosaurus, a rare carnivore relative of Tyrannosaurus rex from the Jurassic period. The primary focus of the museum is the Mesozoic period, which is also known as the Age of Dinosaurs. But the museum cultivates specimens from exclusive local dig sites, and guests are able to view paleontology students from Mesa Lands Community College, and the curator preserves specimens through a window located in the exhibit hall. The museum also houses a stunning collection of minerals from all over the world. These are displayed in the exhibit hall and sold in the expansive gift shop. The renovated depot, now that's another treasure and another surprise. It houses a fascinating railroad museum, and it's also a great excuse for exploring the original business heart of Tucumcari. And if you overnight at one of the vintage motels, be sure to check out the historic Odeon Theater. It opened in 1937. Okay, now this is a bit of a Route 66 detour, but it's a drive I can highly recommend. And Las Vegas was located on the National Old Trails Road and the Santa Fe Trail. Plus, it's literally just a couple of miles from the pre-1937 alignment of Route 66 that runs to Santa Fe and then down on into Albuquerque. Highway 104 from Tucumcari to Las Vegas, it's just a hair over 100 scenic miles. Still, I add this to my top list of scenic drives in the country. You've got ghost towns, and you've got views from scenic overlooks that are just absolutely breathtaking. Las Vegas is on the cusp of a long overdue renaissance. Until the late 1960s, there were actually two towns, Old Las Vegas and then Las Vegas. The Old Town dates to at least the 1830s and is an absolute treasure trove of historic buildings. There are literally hundreds of buildings on the National Register of Historic Places. One is the renovated Plaza Hotel that dates to the 1880s. The street out front is the Santa Fe Trail, and an old bridge down on Bridge Street has a plaque that claims Coronado crossed that stream at this site in 1540. Much of the newer section of town has a multitude of beautiful old buildings built between 1890 and 1920. The crown jewel is the recently renovated Castaneda Hotel. This was the first Fred Harvey Company Railroad Hotel, opened, I believe, it was 1899. And the fellow who renovated the property is Alan Affelt, the same fellow who redid the La Posada in Winslow. Lots and lots of history at this hotel. Just one hint, Teddy Roosevelt hosted a reunion for the Rough Riders at the Castaneda. I really recommend exploring Las Vegas on foot and in segments. There's just so much to see. There are some great restaurants. The restaurant at the Plaza Hotel, superb, excellent. Regional specialties, a lot of locally grown foods and produce, just wonderful, first rate. There's even a drugstore with a soda fountain on the other side of the plaza. Wow, I just noticed what time it was. I am always amazed by how fast time flies when we get together on Sunday morning. I hate to cut this short, but there's so much more to share. But that gives us an excuse to get together again next Sunday morning. And I sure don't want to wear out my welcome and beat my gums too long. Before I get to your questions and wrap up the program, I want to give a shout out to Route Trip USA. If you're a fan of road trips, give these fine folks a holler. They'll help you transform that dream into memories that will last a lifetime. As a bonus, if you book a Route 66 adventure, you can enhance that odyssey by arranging with them to let me be your guide to historic Kingman, Arizona. In response to inquiries about signed copies of my books, copies of Murder and Mayhem on the Main Street of America, Tales from Bloody 66, and 100 Things to Do on Route 66 Before You Die, they are available on our website at jimhinckleysamerica.com. And just as with PBS, I want to give a hearty thank you to the supporters of our crowdfunding initiative. Your dedication and continuing support make many of our programs possible. To be honest, I cannot imagine Jim Hinckley's America without you guys. Thank you. And of course, one more plug. This one is for the one and only Wagon Wheel Motel in Cuba, Missouri. This is the oldest continuously operating motel on Route 66. Lovingly renovated, it is a gem. My dearest friend and I, we never miss an opportunity to spend the night at the Wagon Wheel and to visit with Connie Eccles. And this past week, we hit another milestone. There are now more than 6,500 followers of the Jim Hinckley's America Facebook page. It looks like folks really enjoy our shared adventures and my God-given gift and talent for telling people where to go. Next week on Coffee with Jim, I've got something a little bit different. I am going to be sharing some interesting Native American history and some related places that will enhance your next odyssey and road trip. And as always, I hope that today's program has inspired a road trip or two. So, with that said, let's get to your questions and see what we can answer for you today. Nolan, good morning. I'm glad the coffee was on. Mr. Finnessy, good morning. And Sandra and Clemens all the way from the Netherlands. My goodness. Andy, yeah, we're supposed to get more wind, gale force winds, 50 mile an hour or so. It was been in the 70s and 80s. It's going to be down around 60 for the next few days. And then we'll have 90 degrees by weekend. Miss Connie, good morning. I hope you enjoyed the plug for Tucumcari this morning. Tara, good morning. I'm sure sorry I missed your neon program yesterday. I was engaged with Mojave Community College yesterday. Miss Angela Moreland is with us. Good morning, Miss Angela. Angela, in case you folks didn't know, you can find information on our website, but she is the proprietor of the one and only Cactus Inn Motel in McLean, Texas. And she is the face for Route 66, the dawn of a new century. She's bringing that time capsule back to life. Thank you for your dedication and support, Miss Angela. Hey, thank you for that update, Tara. Clemens, you're exactly right. Tara, thank you. Send me that information. I'll get it in circulation. That'll be an important program on May 22nd. An update on California tourism in Route 66 post COVID-19. Good morning, Daniel. Miss Maggie, all the way from Michigan. Clemens, you're right. Highway 104 is a delight. That is just a wonderful, wonderful drive. Yeah, New Mexico's pretty neat. Susan, thank you. I'm glad everybody enjoyed this. Next week, like I said, we're going to be doing something a little different, a little bit of Native American history and some related sites. Now, I think it's going to be kind of surprising for a lot of folks. Excuse me. Hey, is there any questions? Anything I can answer for you? Anything I can do? Angela, truly my pleasure, and I sure hope to see you this year. You know, if you stop by, McLean is, if you stay at the Cactus Inn Motel, it's only a spit and a jump from the great Red River Steakhouse. And there's quite a few little things to see there in McLean. But Angela, I sure hope that I'll get to see you this year. Right now, our tentative plan is to be on the road heading east on Route 66 this fall, but we hope that you have a very busy and productive season. And we'll see how that goes. If I do get that away, I sure hope we can sit down and do a live program with you from the motel. Well, folks, you know, I think it wraps it up this morning pretty well. I'm always so glad that you folks could join us and invite your friends. Let's make it a coffee party next week. And I guess until then, my friends, take care and keep the wheel side down on the road. And we shall see everybody next Sunday morning, 7 o'clock. Another episode of Coffee with Jim. Thank you. Connie, thank you very much. Yeah, Silver City is a delight. I spent a lot of time down in that country, and I'm really partial to Tucumcari, and Las Vegas is, man, that's a real treat. And it looks like Tucumcari and Las Vegas are on the cusp of a pretty delightful, amazing, fascinating, and exciting renaissance. And that's always good to see. Well, folks, thank you again. And until we meet again, my friends, adios and vaya con Dios, mi amigos. Bye-bye.